Welcome back, Photoshop users. Today I want to talk to you about color range, and I'm also going to talk a little bit about the properties panel. So we have this flower here, and what I want to try to do is I want to try to isolate the orange part, or the actual flower, from the background, because I want to do some color changes on that flower. And we could use the pen tool and mask around this, or draw a path around it. Might be a little time consuming. We could use the lasso tool, quick select, all those selection tools could be used. And I think the trick with inside Photoshop to be a good artist is to know what tools to use and when. And sometimes the selection tools like the lasso tool, your primitive selection tools like the elliptical marquee and the rectangular marquee are just fine. We can make nice selections. And then other times we want to use different selection techniques. So today we're going to go up under Select, and we're going to pull down to Color Range. And you'll see this little dialog box pops up. Now we don't see anything in here masking, because we really haven't told Photoshop what do we want to mask, or what do we want to select. And how we're going to do that is we're going to come over here with this eyedropper tool, and we're just going to come over here and click. And you'll see as I click on that yellowish orange color, you'll see that this dialog box lights up telling you what you have selected. If I click back here in the green area, now I don't have any of those orange values, I've got more of the green values. Alright, so today I want you to try to select the flower. And we're going to click in here, and you'll see it changes depending on where I click. And it changes because of this fuzziness setting. That fuzziness setting is going to kind of expand your selection based on where you clicked. Okay, so that's kind of our fine-tuning adjustment to allow us to select more of that flower. The other options we have over here are the plus eyedropper and the minus eyedropper. And just like most other tools in Photoshop, if we want to add to a selection, we're going to hold down what key? Yes, that is right, the Shift key. And you'll see that when you hold down the Shift key, your eyedropper turns into a little plus eyedropper. I don't have to come over here and select these, although I can, but I've gotten in the habit of just holding down Shift. And if we hold down Option, you'll see the little minus eyedropper tool come up. So sometimes we're going to make selections. We might select part of this background that we don't want, and we'll just use our Option key to subtract from. Alright, so here we go. We're going to click, and you'll see that our selection updates over here. And then I'm just going to Shift click, and we can actually Shift click and drag through part of this image. That's adding those colors in those areas. And we can even come over here. Since we're seeing some of these areas not selected, we can come over here and Shift drag to select more of those values. Now, some of these, as I click and drag over, you're going to see some of this background showing up, or starting to come through as a selection. So then I would maybe hold down Option, turn it into the minus, and I'll click and drag. And it's going back and forth, so. And my goal here is to try to isolate these edges. I'm not so worried about these interior elements, because I know that I can use my Shift key and my lasso tool with the Shift key pressed and add to the selections. So as long as I can get a fairly good selection around those outside edges, that's kind of what I'm looking for and striving for here. So I'm going to drag that fuzziness up. I'm going to hold down Shift and maybe just kind of click in here. Alright, that looks pretty good. I'm getting some back here, so I'll hold down Option and click back in there. And you see it kind of just, sometimes it goes away. Your selection, that's not too bad. In other words, I've got my edges here. I can go in and paint some of those areas. I'll try to choose some more. Hold down Option to subtract. Change my fuzziness up a little bit. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to just get a good edge around those outside edges. We also had the selection preview down here, and this part of the dialog box affects what shows up over here in on your actual file. Right now I have none. I can choose grayscale so I can kind of see my selection over here a little better. That's not too bad. So I'm going to just kind of click over here on some of these lighter values. So that really helped out. So I'm kind of getting these edges, and what I'm trying to do is look at these edges to try to get that as clean as possible. And I think that looks pretty good. I'll drag up my fuzziness a little bit. That's looking good because see, these areas I can paint away in my layer mask, or once I go ahead and hit OK, I can go in there and add to that selection. So for me, that looks pretty good. The other things we can choose over here is a black matte. So depending on how you want to look at your selection over here, you have those options. I tend to either be in none or in that grayscale mode. So we'll just leave it as that grayscale mode. This forever and ever and ever. And still maybe not get it exactly the way we want it. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. You'll see that your selection is made, right? And then we could take our lasso tool. So if I hold down Shift, I'm going to add to that selection. So I can just kind of start going through here, and I'm adding a lot of this information since I know it's, so we got our edge the way we want it. So like I said, these selection techniques are not perfect. They're pretty close, and then we want to add or use some of our other tools to perfect the selection. So we're going to add to and subtract from, and I'm just holding down Shift with my lasso tool and drawing in here. And the important thing is that we have our edges masked fairly clean. Alright, so now what I'm asking you to do is, once you have your selection made, we are going to add a adjustment layer, because a hue saturation adjustment layer, because I want you to change this flower to purple. And we're going to do that and work with that inside our properties panel. So I'm going to go pull up here, and I'm going to open up my properties panel, and I just happen to have my adjustment layers attached to that properties panel. If you don't have your adjustments, you may have to open up that adjustments window. And I'm just going to come in here, and I'm going to click on my hue saturation adjustment layer. These are all non-destructive, and what that did was it took my selection and turned that into and applied that to my hue saturation adjustment layer. And I can slide this down to change that color. And the cool thing with this properties panel, this is where you're always going to interact with your adjustment layers. So if I changed or added a brightness and contrast, you'll see that right here in my properties panel, I'm going to interact with that and make my changes. We can also click on our mask and work on our mask inside the properties panel. So sometimes you might want to feather it. So maybe your selection is just a little bit too hard edged. I'm going to come over here and option click to show you what the mask looks like. So we can feather it or we can not feather it. So sometimes your mask may be a little too sharp, so you might want to just feather that edge a little bit. And we can actually change the density. Now we've talked in the past about layer masks, and 100% black hides or conceals that adjustment layer. If I bring that down to 50%, now you'll see that some of that adjustment layer is affecting the background simply because we no longer have 100% black back here, but we have 50% gray. Okay? And if we take that all the way down, we'll see that we have all white, and that means that that layer, or that adjustment layer, is affecting the entire image. There's no masking going on. So we can adjust this density of our layer mask, and we can feather that layer mask to let some of that information come through. Okay, so just remember, the Properties panel is a place for you to interact with those adjustment layers. We can also interact with our layer mask, so we can soften those edges a little bit. And just remember that selection tools are as good as they can be, but they don't have to be perfect. You may have to add to that selection with another tool, and we may even have to come in here and paint with a paintbrush to make it perfect if we see some areas that masking didn't get. We can always, and that's the nice thing about these non-destructive adjustment layers, and I'm always encouraging you guys to use non-destructive adjustment layers and layer masking. Okay, so that's it on color range and properties. I hope this video tutorial was helpful, and I will see you down the road in yet another video tutorial on Photoshop. Thanks for watching.